Matty Loves Podcast. Matty Loves Podcast.
Welcome to episode 7 of Matty Loves Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Simone. With me, as always, is Dr. Tom Lucas. Tom, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. Lucky number 7, episode 7.
That's
Feeling
right.
good.
Yeah,
Feeling
I know.
ready.
There's something about this particular episode to where I feel that, I don't know. There's something lucky that's going to be involved in this somehow. One day, maybe.
Hey, we're gonna hang in there, so you all hang in there with us, and we'll see where this goes.
So, what have you been up to over the past week?
Well,
So-
I'm back on the job, so the cabin fever is finally, shaking away, and we're returning to a level of normalcy, and just been sort of catching some of the cool movie previews that are coming up, getting ready for the fall. I'm ready to be over this Florida heat too, and I'm ready for hockey season. So, let's bring on October, man.
There's so much sports-wise, in this time of year with, you got football coming up, you got hockey coming up. For those of you basketballians out there, basketball is right around the corner. I'm sure that, for all you people that watch NBA TV in the summertime, I'm sure you all are pumped up about that. But yeah, it's, fall's looming. And for me, I always enjoy the fall season the best. Maybe
You just got to get through August, You got to be a super diehard baseball guy.
Yeah, sure.
And then August is fine.
Yeah.
But otherwise, August is kind of that lull where you just being from Detroit, born and raised, this is the time where you start getting the hopeful Lions articles. And usually by the end of September, the glaze is off the donut.
Right. They make that Kool-Aid seem like it's going to be the best tasting Kool-Aid each and every season, and then you get to like mid-October and you realize that it's bad.
It's all the post-apocalyptic articles start settling in, and my dad used to always taunt me that the Lions had never won anything in his lifetime except for whatever the championship was before the league merged.
The NFL championship.
Yeah, is it Bobby Lane? I know that's not right.
Hell, I'm right with you when as far as all that goes. The Detroit Lions never won a Super Bowl. The Detroit Lions have never been to a Super Bowl.
Never.
Yeah.
Not even with Barry Sanders.
Oh my gosh,
and Herman Moore and Roger Perriman.
The '92 team with Scott Mitchell at the helm.
Yeah, Bitchell is what we used to call him. For a big guy, man, he did not like to get hit, So I just don't know how you have like the highest rated receiving tandem and Barry Sanders and you don't win a Super Bowl.
And that defense was so good too, man.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so between the Lions and my Philadelphia Eagles, you and I are pretty frustrated constantly as football fans one way or another.
I will give you credit, though. Most Eagles fans that I meet are almost like religious fundamentalists when it comes to the Eagles. It's almost like they hate every other team for existing. That's been my experience.
Oh, I totally hate every other NFL team for existing.
Well, you don't put it out as much as some other Eagles fans.
Right.
That
Well, you sit with me on a Sunday, and you'll hear me say I hate that ellipses constantly. Anybody that knows me knows exactly what I'm talking about. That's been around me for NFL Sunday. So we got sports coming up. It's August, and I'm already stoked for Star Wars. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and we're planning on doing a show.
Oh
man.
yeah,
we're doing a special.
It's gonna happen, y'all. It is gonna happen. Leading into Star Wars in December, we are gonna do a full-on panel. Now the specifics, of course, haven't been ironed out. We're still a little ways off. But what I'm wanting to do is we sit down, we record an episode before we see the film, which would be episode 7, released December, 18th?
I believe, yeah.
I think it's
right?
18th. Oh, I don't know.
16th or 18th.
Something.
It's the 10th.
10th, yeah, something like that. But anyway, we're going to come in. We're going to record. We're going to talk about our expectations, what we want to see, what we think is going to happen. And then we'll go see the movie and then come back and record, another episode and hopefully gush for an hour or so.
I'm prepared to be excited. I remember I was living in LA when Phantom Menace came out, and I used to go down to Hollywood and see the people that were camped out there for about a month or so waiting to get into Phantom Menace.
Get out of here. A month?
Yeah, there's a documentary about those people, and you just, post all the, backlash on the prequels. I really, I bet all those people really wish they had that month back,
Well, it could be people that are like, it was the experience, man. I was in line for episode 1. You could have those people, but yeah, at the same time, there's probably a couple that was like, I drove all the way for Cleveland and spent 2 months of my life, waiting for the damn episode 1 to come out, and then I go there and I find out that midichlorians are what make Jedis Jedi.
I did not read the article, but I believe those have been removed from the canon.
Metachlorians?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to just be really interested for episode 7 to see how they deal with the original trilogy, because if they're smart, or not the original trilogy, I should say. I always say that. I'm talking about episodes 1 through 3. Okay. I think that if they just leave it alone and don't reference it at all and don't do any sort of Easter eggy stuff from episodes 1 through 3, it'll be fine. Because those films, a buddy of mine last night, I was telling you earlier, my friend Pete, he told me, you got to have a leg to stand on. You got to have a base for the entire story. And say what you want about episodes 1 through 3, that's what it gives you. And I agree with him there. Yes, true. It does, it sets everything up, but it does it also shitty. So,
yeah, I am very encouraged for the next film and potentially the ones after that. And one of the cool things about the whole Disney acquisition of Star Wars, which, by the way, is for $4 billion, which sounds like an incredible amount of money. But I was just watching on the news that, I think to date this year, the Disney parks have cleared $13 billion in profit. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Star Wars was probably not that big a deal in terms of money making. But the word is, in another year or two, there's going to be a Star Wars land.
Yes.
At Disney World and Squeal. I'm there.
Yeah. And yeah, I've been very fortunate in my trips to Disney since I've been down here, and I haven't paid a lick to get in the parks.
Wow.
Yeah,
cool.
I've gotten really lucky. So hearing that kind of just hurts me inside, because I know that it's probably going to be money shelled out, but it's probably also going to be money well worth it. I mean, just that little corner of the Star Wars simulator ride in Hollywood Studios. I mean, I could just hop on that thing and ride it back to back to back until I'm like, okay, I've already seen this sequence. Let's move on.
Right on.
So, yeah, I'm excited about Star Wars. Tom's excited about Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars on the horizon, that's some good news. But speaking of good news, we have a segment that we like to do here on Matty Loves Podcast. And this segment's called Good News and Bad News.
Yeah, Matty's got good news. Yeah, Matty's got the bad news. Tom's got that good news. But Tom's got bad news. Good news and bad news. Yeah.
So, this week, Tom and I, instead of giving our own separate good news and bad news, we're both kind of doing a joint effort here this week. Our good news and bad news is focused on upcoming comic book films. Over the past week, we finally got to see the official trailer for the Deadpool movie.
Oh my God, dude. I am invigorated. I am excited. I This is a comic-centric podcast. This is a geek-centric podcast, but I do run a really fine line with the amount of superhero content that's out there. I've said it before. In the 50s, Westerns ruled all. All media, Westerns was where it was at. And right now, we are in the, golden age of the superhero genre. And at some point, it will crest, and something will take its place. And I'm really, I'm very tentative about each film as it comes out, But Deadpool, within the first 20 seconds of that trailer, I wanted to be in the theater at that very moment.
Well, Deadpool's the type of character that you get the right writers, the right director, there's no way you can go wrong.
Yeah.
And not just no way you can go wrong with the character, there's no way that you can go wrong with the audience, because if you have Deadpool being Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds is going to play Wade Wilson,
he's going to crush it.
Yeah, everybody's going to be entertained, and I think that this film, like you said, you're talking about the films that you're waiting for this era of comic book entertainment to crest. I think that the Deadpool movie is going to show a bunch of people, hey, you can make a comic book movie, it can be rated R, and you're going to sell the shit out of it regardless.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what this film's going to do. Unfortunately, I think that this film is going to have, there's going to be more characters that get properties that shouldn't, that are Deadpool-esque. And it's going to end up falling flat on their face, but, that it is what it is. Now, I'm just, predicting the future here.
Hey, has there ever been a Deadpool Lobo crossover?
No.
I kind of want one.
Yeah.
I want a book.
Deadpool, they missed out on throwing Deadpool in the amalgam, the Marvel DC crossover
right, yeah,
in
that
the
would have been
mid-90s.
And what do you think Liefeld's kickback is on the movie?
Well,
you think
Liefeld's in the film.
Is he?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in the San Diego Comic-Con sizzler that they showed that was up, briefly, I managed to catch it. The one that a lot of people caught was, on the video itself, the size of the screen was about the size of like 2 nickels side by side. It was like really far back in Hall H or whatever, and they're recording. And then I found one that was like really up close. And anyway, yeah, there's one part where Deadpool's like walking through a tattoo parlor. And, Rob Liefeld's in there getting a tattoo.
Does it show what he's getting a tattoo of?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But he walks
probably
by.
like of Ben Franklin, right? Or, $100 bill.
Profit.
Right.
But yeah, he walks by and zings Liefeld, So, and they didn't add that in the trailer, which I'm glad, So that'll be something that hopefully, I'll forget by the time I go see that movie next year.
But yeah, super stoked. I just can't imagine it disappointing.
T.J. Miller, that dude is hilarious,
right.
man.
And, yeah. And did you watch the HBO Silicon Valley?
No, I haven't watched Silicon Valley yet.
He is for me the highlight of Silicon Valley. I don't really know the guy. What has he done before?
Okay, so T.J. Miller for me, and it's a shame to say because I wish I could have seen more stuff that he's been a part of. I've seen him on I think he's done that At Midnight with Chris Hardwick on Comedy Central.
Okay.
But he also was the camera guy in Cloverfield, the comic relief.
Really?
Yes, he's holding the camera running around, and he's the sensible guy that's like, don't go in there,
I just have such bad memories of that film. I guess I had blotted it out.
I love that film.
Yeah, well, we can agree to disagree on that. I think it was the 4-hour headache I had after all the shaking.
Yeah, that's definitely a Dramamine. That's you're gonna have to drop some Dramamine. I saw it in the theater and it made me sick.
Yeah, no, and I think I saw it in 3D too. Oh. And then at the end of it, I wanted to punch J.J. Abrams in the throat. I had a headache for hours. And actually, that was the movie that makes 3D a hard sell for me. A lot of the times, I would prefer to see the 2D version of a film. I don't know what it is, but they give me headaches. So.
Interesting.
But Deadpool, good news.
Yes.
Looks good.
Yes.
Looks like it's being done well.
Yeah, it looks spot on. And Colossus, too. I mean,
Oh, well, Colossus is my boy. We're actually going to get to that in a little bit, but that is the best on-screen version of Colossus I've seen.
Yeah, he looks great.
Doesn't even say a word in the trailer.
Right.
Just bats him right into the side of a car. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so that, if you didn't know, that's our good news. Then on the other side of the coin, we have the bad news. And the bad news is going to be covering a film that was released, I guess, this past weekend, which would be Fantastic Four, directed by Josh Trank, who directed Chronicle. Did you ever see Chronicle?
Chronicle is a great
Amazing.
movie.
Love that film. Max Landis wrote it. He's another one of those, geniuses of Hollywood, kind of Kevin Smithian almost.
Yeah.
He grew up just immersed in all of geekdom.
Chronicle's a perfect superhero origin movie with, some great, realistic elements to it. And in terms of flight, when the characters are flying around, some of the best
Absolutely
presentation of flying superheroics or superpowers or whatever you want to call them. And even though I'm not a huge fan of the handheld cam,
found footage
thing, really well done because it settles.
Right.
It settles. We get that entry point into the scene, and then the camera settles, and we can concentrate more on the story and less on the delivery, which I think a lot of found footage films get so wrapped up in making it look like found footage that we lose a little bit on the story end. But yeah, I was super impressed with Chronicle.
Now, did you see Fantastic Four?
I have not, and I will be quite honest. I think unless I am like waiting to get my car worked on and it's on TV in the waiting room or something like that, I won't be going to the theater to see it. I'll watch it if it's in front of me. But
yeah, I have yet to see the film too. However, the only reason that I threw this on the podcast in this episode is just because of what's kind of transpired in the just few days since that movie was released.
oh my God, it's like an implosion, right?
Yeah, the film's director, Josh Trank, and you know what? I don't know if he secretly thought this is going to be a great way to get some publicity and get people out to see the film. I don't think that's the way it was taken. I don't even know if that's what his point was. But he went on Twitter. Did you hear about this?
He tweeted that like if he had his way, it would be a different film.
He said that he had a fantastic cut of the film, and that it will never see the light of day. Pretty much blaming Fox for the reason that Fantastic Four apparently just blows.
Well, isn't it like challenging for one of the lowest rated films on Rotten Tomato?
Yeah, it's
Tomatoes.
It's definitely down there. I mean, it's like in the teens.
Woof.
Yeah, so you know what I mean. Rotten Tomatoes is Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, right.
But
sure.
at the same time, it's just the whole thing is as far as just overall filmmaking goes. I know that a lot of directors have gotten coin to direct some stinkers.
Well, sure. I mean, you got to work.
Sure.
And not everyone gets to be a Kubrick or a Scorsese, where every film is a masterpiece. And arguably... McG. McG. Most of the guys and gals, they got to work. You take the gig and you try to do your best. And when you take on an IP, when you take on something like the Fantastic Four, which are iconic characters for 50 years or so, a cornerstone of the Marvel universe.
The first family.
Which if you've ever read Astro City, that's the first family is his take on the Fantastic Four. It's pretty interesting.
I gotta get that.
Yeah, I got some Astro City I can totally throw your way. My God, because in this day and age where, the internet and, online chatter is what it is, you're groaning under the weight of expectations, of history. And then, of course, there's the studio system, which is art by committee.
Right.
And, the fact is that Fantastic Four is a product. Mm-hmm. It's not art. It's not cinema. It is a product, and it is about maximizing profit for that product. And when that happens, you got a lot of people in your kitchen. You can't just make a movie. Like with Chronicle, from what I understand, that was pretty much a hands-off, breeze of a film for them to make. Various people said it was a real joy, but now you're in the big money, big studio, big IP, and Fox is shown to be, I love the term tone deaf in terms of understanding what the product is. You just got people who don't understand what they're working with making decisions. So, plus I heard he was kind of a combative guy.
Yeah, I heard he was rather, I don't think he was necessarily the easiest guy to deal with.
Right.
But at the same time, at the end of the day, Fox, let it go. Let him go. Let the Fantastic Four go.
Right.
Let the X-Men go.
Cut him loose.
Yes, because it's affecting my reading, you bastards.
Right. So Fantastic Four is canceled as a title, right?
Right now it is. There haven't been any announcements for a new Fantastic Four series, but I guarantee you we'll get one by April.
Okay.
Well, we're probably just a few months off from them saying the Fantastic Four are coming back. Because Thing's going to be a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, I think that's a good move.
Yes, and then I think Johnny Storm is going to be rolling with the Inhumans.
Okay.
Beast as well. I could be mistaken, but I know Beast is going to be rolling with Black Bolt and all those cats. So
Curious.
That should be interesting. But talking about Fantastic Four, just real quick. Did you see the first two films?
Yes.
Okay, you saw the first two.
No one's seen the Roger Corman version, which was done just to retain the rights, and it was, filmed almost, it's basically just a lark. But yes, I have seen.
Wait a minute. You're talking about the original Fantastic Four film from the 80s?
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen that
You
film.
have?
With the hand at the end of the movie, the big hand when the car's driving off, like Grease style?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that piece of
Okay,
shit.
how did you come across that?
Oh, that was total trash. But, it was kind of like that Captain America movie.
Well, yeah. Well, the story on that is that they just wanted to retain the rights, so they had to film something.
Yes.
It was never intended to be distributed. I remember... I don't know. I was in middle school or whatever. I used to buy magazines like Fangoria and Starlog.
Sure. And they got the pictures in there, and you're like,
And I was like, to me it looked good because in 1980 special effects were, whatever. But
wouldn't it put out through like 21st Century Entertainment or something?
Something really flimsy.
Well, I remember
weird.
the Captain America trailer in the theaters. Like, I remember seeing the trailer for the film.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me stoked, but it never got a theatrical release, and I eventually had to like record it off of your classic Showtime like at 3 a.m.
Right on. So I saw the first two. The Galactus Cloud.
Morpheus
and other things, and I don't know.
No.
So what is this? What are you leading me into?
All right. So one thing I wanted to try as I was thinking about talking about the Fantastic Four film is Fantastic Four. When I think to myself, if I had the ability to write or get a hold of a franchise and write a series of films for the specific franchise, for some reason the Fantastic Four come to my mind first and foremost. And I'm not even a master of the Fantastic Four. I'm not even an expert, but I think this all came from after I saw that first film.
Okay.
And I was like, what in the hell are y'all doing? So right now, I just want to do a little thing called what Matt and Tom would do with a franchise in 5 minutes or more.
This sounds like a new segment.
This is Tom. First off, with the new Fantastic Four premise, don't you agree that it's better if you just stick to the old plan to where you have Ben, you have Reed Richards, and then you have Johnny Storm and Sue Storm and their brother and sister?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This isn't like a collective of hey, I'm this doctor and I'm gonna adopt these kids or whatever. I haven't even seen the damn film. This is just what I'm taking off of the trailers or whatever.
Right.
Okay. So. I think that the Fantastic Four, the type of characters, like I say this pretty much about any of them, just because I've read about it I've read them so much. But Fantastic Four, you don't need an origin movie.
Oh my God, Can we not do origin movies ever? Can we be done with origin movies?
Yeah, you don't need the origin with Fantastic Four. You can do all of that during the opening credits within the first 5 minutes of the film. We get it, what happened to them or whatever. But I think that the mistake that the first film made was Doom. Dr. Doom is tough. He's a tough character to, I think, to put in a film because, for one, he's so powerful.
Right.
And secondly, he's so damn complex. Like, there's so much to Dr. Doom. And you like as far as just like the mystical side of Dr. Doom, he's a master of magic,
Right.
And I think that Dr. Doom as a character is someone that you kind of build sort of like maybe what they're doing with the Mandarin in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know how like the Mandarin's kind of been around since the first Iron Man film, and then in the most recent Ant-Man, at the very beginning of the film, there's a dude with the 10 rings tattoo on his neck and stuff. So, like, they've kind of, and then, they made the Mandarin sort of, he's looming still. And I think that the presence with Dr. Doom in a series of Fantastic Four films would work out well, just as well.
Also, too, I'd briefly read an article the other day online that said that, Darth Vader, and Dr. Doom have all these similarities. And Darth Vader is, of course, pretty much a globally known character.
Right.
And that, it's hard under the weight of a character like that to kind of bring in a Dr. Doom without, sort of, I don't know, there being some kind of like almost like pop culture friction with it. There are some great similarities.
Sure.
Between the characters. And the same article had also talked about how Fantastic Four in some ways is we do have to kind of look at it as a relic. These are very old characters, the oldest, and so you have to really kind of figure out how to make them relevant to a modern audience, but retain the spirit.
Sure. And I just think that if I were to grab a hold of the if I had the Fantastic Four franchise and they're like, Matt, what would you do with it? For me, I'd take the cover of the very first Fantastic Four comic. You look at that cover,
right,
and I say, that's the movie. I'm gonna make a monster movie. It's gonna be the Mole Man. And the Mole Men.
Nice.
And it's going to be like an invasion flick.
Okay.
And underneath all of that, you start planting the Doom seeds, but you don't give them Doom yet. You just let it lie, and then you do the classic. I would do the old Mortal Kombat technique from the Mortal Kombat film from the 90s. I don't know if you ever saw
It's
that.
Great movie. Great soundtrack, too.
At the very end, when they're all celebrating at the temple, and then Shao Kahn shows up.
Right.
Well, what I would do at the end of the first Fantastic Four movie would be, everything's great, and then they just see this big tidal wave coming in the background, and they're like, "What is this?" And it's Namor.
Yeah.
And the Atlanteans, and now they're invading.
Okay.
Because something that the Mole Men did disrupted, the seas or whatever like that. Have some connection there to where they're taking something from the ocean in order to help their invasion of New York or whatever.
I'm going to go ahead and cast Lee Pace as Namor, too. You haven't had a chance to see *Halt and Catch Fire*, but
I know exactly.
He's also in *The Hobbit*.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
He's got the physique, he's got the dark, he's got the eyebrows, he's got the deal, man. He can do Namor with a little bit of makeup. Little glue on wings for his ankles or whatever.
Dude, I mean, I just think that would be so cool. And then go into the second film, it picks up right where the first one left off. And, Namor comes in and then he sees Sue. And then we take Sue and I wouldn't do the comics or anything that they've ever done in the comics, but I would do the Bram Stoker's Dracula type deal with Sue, to where Namor sees Sue and it reminds him of a lost love in the past. Okay, yeah. That he lost the first time they tried to invade, and then the Terrans killed her unmercifully just for being an Atlantean or something like that. Oh yeah,
no, Namor's got some serious grudges, man.
Sure,
he's got serious hatred.
So then you do the whole love triangle with Sue, Namor, and Reed.
Right.
And that would be my second movie. It's such a cataclysmic battle at the very end of it all. Kind of like the first one, just when you think it's over, all of a sudden they see the Watcher. And he's like, He points to the sky. And
the big G?
Something's coming.
The big G.
And then the third film is where you do Galactus. You bring Galactus in, and the Atlanteans and the Fantastic Four have to stop Galactus. And then at the end of that film, just when you think it's all over, we finally see the origins of what becomes Doctor Doom.
Okay. I'm digging it.
What would you do? You think with Fantastic Four?
Well, I have been thinking about it. Sort of watching the the implosion of the film and the fans and the disconnect and all that, and I'm gonna do a totally different take on it, and I'm gonna say, okay, so the core of the Fantastic Four is that they're a family. They're a family. They're really tight, and they have all the family dynamics you could ever want to write or stretch out or whatever.
Sure.
I would market them as a family-oriented superhero
like Incredibles,
story.
Kind of.
Exactly.
Okay.
That kind of feeling that you get watching The Incredibles, that's what I would do with it. It would be something that, families can go to the Avengers and stuff like that, but we can even dial it down a little bit and make it more family oriented and play on all those things that anyone that's in a family can relate to, the rivalries, the in-jokes,
sure.
And all that stuff, and still do, some of the storylines that you're talking about,
right.
And that kind of things, because
I just want Namor. I thought that's my whole thing is all I would be doing was just bringing Namor, to the cinematic universe.
I think Namor is a much better character to start with than Doctor Doom, and Galactus, because they are just too big for that, our fourth reboot.
Those are characters you ease into.
Four.
They're so big, you got to ease into that, to where once they come around, you're like, okay, that's why we haven't had Thanos fight the Avengers right away. This is something we're easing into.
And also, I know that Marvel has a plan until the sea levels rise.
Supposedly.
Basically, right? Yeah. As long as they're making money, it's not going to stop.
I think that's the only reason why they keep saying, yes, we have a plan.
What if we do a Guardians movie, right? Where, they're on whatever adventure or thing that they're on, and boom, they run into the Fantastic Four out doing their cosmic stuff. Right? And that's how we introduce our new Fantastic Four family. Is they're not even on Earth. They're out somewhere because they're dealing with some sort of cosmic thing, and then we get a crossover between the Guardians. We can even explain why the Thing would join the Guardians.
It would make more sense for them to work with the Guardians than the X-Men to work with the Fantastic Four. And to be honest with you, after all this the backlash with the new Fantastic Four movie, I don't think they're going to go through with those X-Men Fantastic Four plans.
I don't think so.
Yeah, and then also, too, you got Hugh Jackman, who's like, saying that he isn't going to be playing Wolverine anymore after Old Man Logan, which is what they announced the next Wolverine film would be.
I get
I'm
that.
sure will be just like the comic.
I know a lot of people love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and he's a great actor. I've enjoyed him in so much stuff, but yeah, sure. Let's give it to someone else and
Sure.
see what they can do.
Wolverine,
Do you have any? Is there any word on who they're looking at?
You know what? I think that's still a couple years off. So I don't think they're necessarily worried about that right now. But I think that as far as in American, movie history, if we've had a character that has shown up in films similar to like Bond,
Right.
that can be played by multiple people, I think Wolverine could be that guy.
Oh, sure.
I think that they could go a little shorter.
Stockier.
Yeah, a little stockier.
Yeah, try to get the build a little bit more right.
Sure,
so.
but man, Old Man Logan in Secret Wars right now is so good.
Is it?
It's so good.
Is it,
It's
man?
awesome, man.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like reading that and I'm getting more excited that this is going to be the Wolverine in the Marvel canon for right now, like for the next little bit. That'll be our Wolverine.
I think I'll just have to save my spare change for the omnibus whenever that
Right.
day comes, because it's hard, and I'm sure that some of our listeners can relate. It's hard for me to keep up with any of the individual stuff. We talked about our collections the last 2 episodes,
Right.
and I just can't do it, man. I get excited hearing about this stuff, and I want to read all of it, but I'm going to have to wait till it's packaged up.
Yeah,
That's the only way I'll be able to do it.
I'm fortunate now to where I'm still in a good spot to where I can read and get a weekly pile, but I know eventually I'm going to...
Yeah, but I think it's good for the show, too, that
Sure.
we're very different kinds of
Absolutely.
readers,
Absolutely.
so it helps.
That is for sure. So yeah, that's just our little take on Fantastic Four franchise and whatnot. Moving right along, I don't know about you people, but there's a little thing on the internets called Netflix. Tom and I enjoy perusing every once in a while and finding some gems. This is what we call that random shit on Netflix.
Just got home. I need to get my fix. Let's find out what type of shit that they got on Netflix. Oh, come on, baby. The shit that's on Netflix for me and you, babe.
All right, Tom. So we spoke earlier this week. You kind of gave me a couple things to look at Netflix-wise.
I did.
You just mentioned a few things. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and check it out. The one thing that I did get to was watching the pilot episode of Sense8.
Yeah, man. What'd you think?
Well, first it took me 3 separate viewings to get through the first episode.
Wow, really?
Yes. So that said, retain a lot goes on in that first episode, and I know it's the first episode to get you into the show. For me, I didn't feel like they told me enough about what the hell was going on with Daryl Hannah. There was a whole lot of that consciousness. I'm here one moment and then I'm actually here the next. The blonde character, Riles, is smoking hot. Mm-hmm. I did take that. And then the font on the end credits, I dig.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing too.
Yeah, but that was my take. I mean, I don't really know what's going on. Am I going to continue to watch the show for at least 2-3 more episodes? Sure, but I hate 70-minute TV shows.
Yeah.
Not the shows themselves, the length. I for some reason nowadays, I just can't get through an hour-long Game of Thrones.
Right.
I always have to watch each episode in separate sittings. I can't sit through a whole episode, and I don't know why that is. I used to be able to just... We were talking about this earlier this week. I used to be able to just binge shows, man.
Yeah.
Watch and watch and watch. And I just can't do it anymore. Maybe it's because I got a lot more stuff going on and whatnot, but yeah, I mean, I really tried to sit down and engage myself in the show. But there were just a few things that, like, I just felt that were unnecessary. Like the language, it seems like they're just like throwing 4-letter words out for no reason, just because it's on Netflix,
right? It's not broadcast.
Or certain scenes. There's one particular like sex scene that I was like, okay, all right, this is going on for a long time now. When all they could have handled that whole scene in like 2 minutes with just them laying in bed talking about what the hell's going on.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of the writer's angle too, is that, in JMS, J. Michael Straczynski.
It's really hard for me to think that all of this 100% is him.
It's not, because the Wachowskis are very controlling, entity, and I imagine that he's doing his part, and then they are doing what they will with it. But when you write a scene, the point is, every scene should count. Every scene should be advancing the story forward. Every scene should show a change from the beginning to the end.
Right.
These are all writer's basics. And when you do a sex scene, it should have a reason for
There's
it.
A point.
Yeah, a point. And what are we communicating? Is it a development in the character's relationship? Is it a power thing? What is it? And gratuitous is gratuitous. HBO, which most of its programming I've always really enjoyed, always throws in nudity, I guess. I don't know.
It sells, man.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but like you said, it needs to advance the story. And I felt that in that 70-minute episode, there's about 20 minutes of footage that they didn't even need. They could have just done like, a simple 52-minute pilot,
right?
And been fine. So at the end of the day, I don't know what's going on yet.
Okay. Are you going to watch more?
Yeah. I definitely plan on checking out a few more episodes just to see, what the hell's going on. Because I've heard so much about the show, both good and bad about it, so I really want to figure things out with it. But as of right now, it's kind of it was wacky.
Wacky. Yeah, no, it is different, and most of the chatter that I see online is favorable, and so I have not finished the season yet, because there's always something else. Like I had to pause for Wet Hot American Summer and watch all that. And
I've caught the first 4 episodes of that.
Halt and Catch Fire caught me, and I've been hearing really good things about a show called Mr. Robot, which is on USA. It's not a Netflix thing, but people tell me it's really good. So Sense8, Wachowskis, J. Michael Straczynski, anyone that is in geekdom ever knows those names, and they're together on a project, so it should be pretty interesting to see where it goes. And I see that you have another hot tip.
I do. Well, this is something that I've already seen that when I first saw it, it wasn't on Netflix. It was around the time where it first came out. Have you ever seen Exit Through the Gift Shop, the BANKSY documentary?
I have not, and it's a shame because I hear very good things.
Banksy made it himself. For any of you that don't know, Banksy is, I don't want to say a graffiti artist. What would you say that he...
I guess street artist.
He's a street artist. He's inspired a lot of people. Your Obey, you see that all the time now. The Andre the Giant face and everything.
It's a clothing label. It's a whole thing.
That dude was definitely inspired by Banksy. But anyway, Exit Through the Gift Shop, I guess, is kind of just Banksy just trying his best to explain why he does what he does, and it goes in and it documents all the different pieces that he's done throughout, like England, and it also talks about when he went to Disneyland. Did you ever see that?
No.
He went to Disneyland, and he went into one of the areas. I don't know if it was a roller coaster or one of the mountains or whatever, but he went in and he took someone that looked like a prisoner from Guantanamo Bay. And it was like one of those old stuffed dolls that were decoration back in the day that it looked like a little girl that was like, bending her head over on a table or whatever, and from a distance you're like, whoa, but it's not really, a person. Well, anyway, it was kind of like one of those deals. It's like a stuffed like marionette to look
intense.
Yeah. So it was kind of like a statement during that period of time to everything that was going on in Guantanamo Bay and whatnot. So needless to say, Banksy is a rather controversial individual, and I highly suggest watching that documentary. Even if you don't watch many documentaries, it's very entertaining. From an artist perspective, he's a genius.
Yeah, a singular vision for sure. And the history will speak well of his influence on the arts, no doubt.
Yes. You got anything?
I do, and it's funny that you say documentary because my pick is a documentary as well. But first I have to ask you, have you ever seen The Island of Dr. Moreau with Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer?
I saw that in the theater.
Yeah, me too, right? Currently rated 23% on Rotten Tomatoes. Considered a steaming pile by most. A beautiful disaster of a film. And it's one of those things where just about everything that could go wrong did.
Brando's last flick.
I believe so. And he was full on Brando madness kind of deal. So anyway, there's a film that's popped up on Netflix called Lost Soul: The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau.
Interesting.
And we were talking earlier about Fantastic Four and what a wreck it is apparently turned out to be. And sometimes it's fun to watch a train wreck in slow motion. And a documentary like this, very, very, painstakingly details all the missteps throughout the whole production. Now, Richard Stanley had come on the scene, and he's an odd guy. He is a very curious, eccentric fellow just to begin with. Okay? He came on the scene. He made a little film in 1990 called Hardware. And, it's kind of a cyberpunk, post-apocalyptic, weird film about a guy who, which is Dylan McDermott? He basically travels the wasteland and collects things and then sells the things back in town. And he's building a sculpture for his girlfriend. And the sculpture includes the head off of an old military grade, like android kind of thing. And it comes to life and then it attacks them.
Okay.
And Hardware is like this cult film that's well loved. And he was able to generate interest in him as a creative force, and eventually he ends up getting a chance to do Dr. Moreau,
which is a remake.
Yes, yeah. Well, Dr. Moreau, for those who don't know, is originally a book by H.G. Wells. And it's about an island where a doctor performs hybrid human-animal experiments and creates all these, anthropomorphic creatures, and it has been said that Joseph Conrad ripped off H.G. Wells to write Heart of Darkness as well, which has a very similar thing where we leave civilization and we go into sort of madness,
right.
So anyway, Dr. Moreau has been around for a long time. They did all this incredible pre-production work. But fairly early on, they lose casting. James Woods was supposed to be in the movie. He's gone, Then they get Val Kilmer, who's infamously hard to work with, and Brando, who's beyond, infamously hard to work with. And the whole thing goes off the rails. Stanley ends up off the project. And here's the best part is he was supposed to just go home. And instead, they were shooting... I want to say off Australia or New Zealand or on this island. Anyway, he basically just goes off into the island and lives in a cabin and smokes pot for months. He never even went home, right? And then he ended up sneaking on the set and being an extra in a bunch of scenes. And, it's layer upon layer of insanity,
Wow.
And it's really... It's a hell of a documentary, and, I would double feature it. I would go out
watch the movie and then watch the making of.
Absolutely.
Right.
But brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And when you see like a film like Tropic Thunder or whatever, which is a great satire of the filmmaking process, it's all laughs. And here is a documentary that shows, this does happen.
Right.
Yeah. So Lost Soul, The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau, highly recommended.
Well, I think when you're assembling a cast that they were attempting to assemble there, they had to consider in their brains, when we're throwing all these people together, hopefully they will all work well. And that's coming from the studio to the director to the actors. It's a very team-oriented process.
They make movies every day.
Right.
People
exactly.
do this every day.
Exactly. And bouncing off of that into our main topic this week, we're talking about the best teams in the history of, geekdom, entertainment,
the world, history.
Yes, our most important teams that have affected us. We've talked about our history in comics and whatnot, but here get into more specifics comic wise. We have a few of our favorite comic book teams, but we also have a few of our favorite teams outside of our usual comic
music, TV, and sports, because teams.
Right. So as far as teams go, and let's go ahead and just start with comic books.
Yeah,
we're here.
That's why we're here.
For you, let's go ahead and just start on the DC side of the fence.
Okay.
Greatest team in the history of the DC universe is without a doubt the Justice League.
Well, yeah.
Hands down. There have been many iterations of the Justice League over the years.
Yes.
Me personally, I'll take the OG Justice League, that being Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, Green Lantern, and Marty Manhunter. I don't know if anyone calls him
John
Marty.
Jones.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone calls him Marty, but, I would. That seems like something Ronnie Raymond would have hit him off with or something. So, yeah, I'm a big OG Justice League fan. You've got all of the components you need to stop a incoming alien invasion.
Stop anything.
Yeah, anyone.
The great criticism always is that DC's heroes are gods.
Yeah.
Or godlike. They're paragons. They're, Avatar. And that Marvel's characters are more in the trenches, realistic, and things like that.
Sure.
I don't... one thing for sure is that DC's pantheon, the Justice League, they really are all virtues. You can boil down a character to a single thematic, and I don't think it's so nice and neat on the Marvel end. Mm-hmm. But they're all like, paragons of whatever particular thematic you want to attach to them. So I don't really know how you do better than OG. Justice League.
Now maybe as far as like hand-to-hand all-out fight goes, saving the world, I don't think you can do in any comic book better than OG Justice League. However, though, there have been iterations of the Justice League that for entertainment value have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Much like, when Grant Morrison took over JLA, outside of Hal being gone, Hal and Barry weren't there, and they were replaced by Wally West and Kyle Rayner. Mm-hmm. But you still had, that was still OG.
What years did Grant Morrison do?
I think Grant Morrison took over JLA in 1997.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's when that started, if I'm not mistaken, 97 or 98.
Sounds about right.
But yeah, so I dig the OG Justice League. Are you with the OG, or do you?
Well, in terms of power and in terms of being a group, of course, but I want to go back 10 years prior to 1987 with, what became Justice League International.
Right. Keith Giffen,
J.M. DeMatteis, Kevin McGuire doing the art. Here's what happens, right? You got John Byrne rebooting Superman. You got George Perez doing Wonder Woman. The rebooting Flash. The rebooting Aquaman. And Hal Jordan is off limits. But you got to keep the Justice League going. So what do? So Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, they sit down and they go, you know what? Let's do something a little bit offbeat. Let's do something that has humor to it. And what kind of team are we going to put together? So first of all, the powers of DC felt bad for them. So they did get Batman.
Sure.
Okay.
The head honcho.
Yeah. And he's kind of hands-off-ish, he kind of comes in and grumbles a lot. And then you do get Martian Manhunter, but we see Blue Beetle come to life.
Yes, Ted Cord.
We Booster Gold, Captain Marvel with the Billy Batson personality baked in, Dr. Fate, and I think this is where my love for Dr. Fate really, really starts. We get Guy Gardner, is our Green Lantern, all right? And he's written to such macho ridiculousness that it's a glorious thing. And speaking of glory, they bring in Captain America, General Glory, during that time. He's also like reawoken from like ice or something, and he's a parody of Captain America, and Guy Gardner worships him.
Oh,
right?
My gosh.
And that's just amazing. You get Black Canary, eventually Captain Atom comes in. This is where we get the introduction of Lobo to the DC universe.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
And yeah, Lobo's like issue 7 or issue 8.
And that was his first appearance.
That is
wow.
that is where Lobo comes in. And one thing too is, I had always associated Guy Gardner strictly with Justice League International, but it turns out that Guy Gardner has actually been in the DC universe since like 1968. Right? So he was a very different sort of guy back then, but he's actually been around. So for what they had and what they did, it is just such a joy to read those books. The character interaction, the jokes, the pacing, the art, everything about it. I will hold that era of the Justice League very dear to me as a reader. Although power-wise, definitely not as strong as our OG OP.
No, but I think
Justice League.
As far as having that, like we were talking about, that like kind of Marvel personal connection that people have with their characters, I think that readers could have more personal connection with JLI than they could with JLA.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot. The Blue Beetle Booster Gold interactions, are just amazing. And of course, later on, Blue Beetle dies.
Right.
And they had done such a great job back then with their relationship that it is a crusher. And there was this great episode of Brave and the Bold where Booster Gold goes back in time so that he can hang out with Ted Cord. And I defy anybody to not get a little misty, watching that show. And the other thing that's cool, too, is that, Watchmen this is the age of Watchmen. Watchmen is cranking. And a lot of people know now that, DC had bought Charlton Comics and had bought all their characters, which is Captain Atom and Blue Beetle and Manhunter and all this Question and all that. And originally had given them to Alan Moore to write a maxi series to introduce them to the DC universe. Instead, Alan Moore writes Watchmen, and he says, well, good news is I think I've written the best thing that I've written yet. Bad news is you'll never be able to use any of these characters again. DC reads it, goes, yes, this is brilliant, change all the characters. So Captain Atom becomes Dr. Manhattan, and Manhunter becomes the comedian, and Blue Beetle becomes Owlman, or Night Owl. Right, so
Rorschach is the Question.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And then they start leaking the Charlton characters into the DC universe, and JLI is where that happens. So there's all these really cool things kind of happening with this run of the book that I really like.
Neat. Well, on the other side, we have DC, and honestly, I mean, as far as DC goes, Justice League, the iterations of Justice League, those are your teams in the DC universe. There haven't been a lot of... I mean, I'm a Rebels fan, but that's like an acquired taste, I guess.
Are you talking about DC super teams?
Yeah.
Well, Teen Titans.
Teen Titans, oh yeah, sure, for sure. Titans.
George Perez, Teen Titans was ridiculously good time.
Absolutely. But it just seems like over in Marvel, there have been more like teams than in the DC books. And the main team, of course, in Marvel is the Avengers.
Right.
However, for me particularly, with the Avengers. Yeah, I'm into the OG Justice League, but the OG Avengers for me, maybe it's also just due to their just the oversaturation of some of these characters. I'm not as partial to your Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Ant-Man, Wasp,
Captain America.
Yeah, Captain America later. I'm more of a fan of the West Coast Avengers.
Okay.
But a specific era. I like the West Coast Avengers near the very end of the series.
Which is what year? Do we know?
We're talking mid-90s here.
Okay.
We're talking like 94, I think, around 94. It was when Hawkeye was running as Goliath.
Okay.
You had War Machine. You had Tigra, Mockingbird, and Wonder Man. But then you also had eventually Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter, and then U.S. Agent.
U.S. Agent. Now, for those who might not know, what was the Goliath alter ego version of Hawkeye all about?
Basically, it was Hawkeye got a hold of some Pym particles because Hank Pym was their science liaison.
Okay.
And more or less, Hawkeye just took the mantle of Giant Man, I guess, but he was Goliath.
How big could Goliath get?
Goliath, I mean, we're talking like, skyscraper height here.
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty powerful. I can't specifically tell you at what point Hawkeye was like, nah, you know what, I'm going to be Goliath. I don't know what event caused him to do that, but I do remember like at West Coast Avengers when John Byrne was writing and drawing it, like they had a story with Magneto and his children with Scarlet Witch finally like went off the deep end for the first time or something like that. And I remember,
yeah, she's crazy.
Yeah, and I remember being really into that. That was kind of around the period of time when I first started reading comic books. I remember when I told you how I got like for Christmas the big lot of comics from my parents. Well, in one of those Marvel lots that I got, I had like several issues of the Avengers West Coast.
Okay.
And then eventually, once I started collecting, I went back and I bought the first volume, The West Coast Avengers.
Okay.
Which is the first miniseries that kind of set everything up. And then from the Avengers West Coast, you got the Great Lakes Avengers. They came out of that series, I think.
Yeah, now who made up that team?
Oh gosh, it was
It's like in the back of my brain, but
I can't even remember who the main was that made up of like Diamondback or Copperhead?
Oh, I think yeah.
Was that who was in that? I don't remember with who the leader with the Great Lakes Avengers were, but I know that they came from their origin story happened within West Coast Avengers.
Yeah, I that's something I will be looking up tonight, I think, just for laughs.
Okay, for you, are you Avengers or are you X-Men?
Okay, so, when I was a wee lad, X-Men wasn't really that big of a book, and of course Avengers were the things that Marvel was best known for, and then when I started really sort of picking up on things, I'd say in middle school, it was about the X-Men.
Right.
And so for me, Marvel was about mutants and about X-Men for a good chunk of the time that I read Marvel books from, I would say, the early 80s through towards the end of that decade.
Definitely.
And I was pretty obsessed with basically the X-Men team that Chris Claremont eventually, of course, took on, that is debuted in Giant Size X-Men #1 back in 1975, and that is the old team being saved by the new team, which was a very clever way to bring in new characters. And we get Colossus, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Storm, Cyclops from the old team, Thunderbird, Banshee, Sunfire.
Yes.
Okay. Now here,
what a collective,
right? And the cover is iconic. It is.
I own it.
I used to own it, right? So, but here's the thing that was really interesting too is that I was very slow to be a Wolverine fan. My favorite X-Men of all time will always be Colossus. I like the bricks. I like the heavies.
Right.
And he was, I love the idea of the steel skin.
He's
and
deep though, too.
Yeah,
man.
he's super deep.
He's got great roots as far as a character goes. And he's a character too that any comic reader can read and empathize.
Right.
Just of what he went through before he became an X-Men, and then what he had to deal with after he became an X-Men as well.
Oh yeah, no, a tortured man.
Certainly.
Right. And then runner up was Nightcrawler. Okay. I think the reason why I loved Nightcrawler so much was that he was fun to draw. And back then I used to draw a lot or try to draw,
right.
And I loved drawing Colossus and I loved drawing Nightcrawler. He is mutant, as you'd want a mutant to be.
Sure,
he looks like a demon and he doesn't even have regular hands or feet. And he's super acrobatic. And, I'd always been a Spider-Man fan, so I like my acrobatic heroes. And then he's, of course, got the little brimstone clouds everywhere, which are also fun to draw. And so, so I think, although I had read a lot of Silver Age stuff when I was a kid that was Marvel and those early cartoons, that are very, very quaint to look at now. Mutants pretty much ruled my world.
They were fresh, man. They were fresh characters. All, the mutants that were rolled out after Giant Size, they were just fresh faces. And I mean, for me personally, I've always been more of an X-Men guy to Avengers, almost like completely. For me, stemming off of your Giant Size crew as the stories progressed, there were a few events that happened, after the Giant Size crew came along, the Dark Phoenix saga.
Well, yeah,
I mean, there was sort of like a change, and then there got to a point to where I feel that Chris Claremont really wanted just a whole new, fresh look for the book.
Right.
And for me, my favorite era of the X-Men came during the Fall of the Mutants. Which actually after the Fall of the Mutants, when Forge took all of the X-Men and Dallas's souls and pretty much Dragon Balled them. He just spread them out throughout the whole entire world.
Right.
Some of them didn't have their memories. Some of them did. Some of them became kids all of a sudden. It was kind of a weird time for the X-Men, but because it was so weird and because it just reset everything the best that it could reset without saying, hey, we're going to reboot the whole book. My favorite X-Men team is led by Storm with the Mohawk.
Oh, yeah.
Forge, Wolverine, Rogue, Colossus, Psylocke, Dazzler, Longshot, and Havoc. The Mark Silvestri, Chris Claremont era.
Longshot
X-Men.
is
Yes.
such a fun character.
He is. I mean, God, man. The X-Men are so awesome because no one X-Men, they're not the same. Like, no one's the same. Everybody is different in their own little ways. Like, you don't have just a bunch of the same characters. I mean, even so with the Avengers, or not the Avengers, but with, like, the Justice League.
Right.
You throw Superman on the Justice League, you throw Captain Marvel on the Justice League. Why? You only need one of them.
Yeah.
They're more or less kind of the same character power-wise.
Right.
But with the X-Men, you had everybody was completely different.
Right.
You had people that could do stuff with their minds, but they could do telepathic stuff in different ways. You had your mind readers, then you had your telekinetics as well. And Psylocke was a little bit of both, and I always thought that was so cool.
It's richer. It's a little bit more complex. And the diversity. There's a character for everybody.
Yep. I dug Colossus during that period of time because he looked like a pro wrestler, They just had him in basically like the red underwear and then like the X-Men symbol on his waist looked like a championship belt.
Right.
I love that, man. I love that.
At the time, for the record too, I loved the Storm redo.
Sure, when she became a kid again?
The punk rock Storm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I love that look
for
her.
Yep. That was when she took over as the leader of the X-Men, and then right after the Fall of the Mutants happened, she Benjamin Buttoned.
Yeah.
And became and reverted back to her childhood self, roaming the streets of New Orleans, and then we get Gambit.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah. So that's my favorite X-Men, and that's a little bit. Do you have any more comic teams that you want to touch on?
No.
right.
I'm those. I got one from DC and I got one from Marvel, and I'm gonna sit with that.
Okay, so let's move on then to like I don't know, like television or film.
Okay, let's do TV.
Okay, so teams. Television teams. Who are some of your favorite teams in the history of television?
Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna go old school and go with Star Trek, the original series.
Yes, we've talked a little bit about the OST.
Everybody knows the characters. Your Kirk, your Spock, your Sulu, your Scotty, all that. Pound for pound, when it hits the fan, what's the team that's gonna figure out the way out? Maximize their resources, get you out of that, it's gonna blow situation where there's just seemingly no way out. If you got Kirk running the show, he's your long shot. It's gonna happen.
Right. You're gonna win.
He's got the angle. I want Kirk and Han Solo to go out and do some business, man. Between the two of those guys,
holy smokes,
the universe is in trouble. So, of all the, I would not consider myself a Trekkie, although I've enjoyed it, my life, and I'll always sit down and watch an episode. I think that if you've got to have a crew, to take on something, I think Star Trek, the original series, is your crew. Should I keep going, or you want to take one?
Okay, man. Keep going.
The team, the A-Team, right? Okay. John Hannibal Smith, Howling Mad Murdoch, B.A. Baracus, and do you know what Face Man's character's first name is?
No.
Templeton.
Oh, wow.
Templeton Peck. The Face Man, okay?
Did you ever watch the movie?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, I never saw the movie.
The movie hits some of the notes, but it's hard when you grow up with the show to really see anyone else doing the do,
Right,
sure. And of course, like a great team that got a van, very style. You got to have a vehicle.
Yeah.
You got to have a vehicle, so, the A-Team.
That was key with, 80s television. I'm going to touch on that a little bit.
Okay.
Any great team with 80s television had a kick-ass vehicle.
You do. You got to have the memorable vehicle. It is necessary, especially if you don't have a headquarters, per se, And that's where it's a little bit different. The last team that I picked, which is really probably going to be out of nowhere for a lot of people, was I was a fan of Warehouse 13. Warehouse 13 was some kind of schlocky, kind of corny show that ran on Sci-Fi Network for 5 or 6 seasons. And it was basically, the idea is, the warehouse at the end of Indiana Jones?
Yeah.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay, imagine that's a thing. Okay? And what they do is there are all these enchanted magical relics throughout the world that are very powerful and can be very damaging. And what they do is they locate them and they retrieve them and they store them
in
for
Warehouse
the safety.
13.
Yeah,
right.
in the safety of humanity. And the long mythos is that there's always been a warehouse.
Right.
That people have been doing this since the beginning of civilization. Okay, so anyway, we get basically a core of 5 characters. Artie, who has been running the warehouse for the long time. You get Pete and Micah, that are Secret Service agents that have been reassigned secretly, and they have this great sort of brother-sister, but maybe they'll kiss one day kind of vibe going. And Pete's a joker, and Micah's very focused and always trying to get things well. You got Claudia, who's the young, roguish hacker, tech, spunky
What year was
girl.
this?
Oh, God, it just finished up about a year or two ago.
Oh, okay, this is a new show.
Yeah, relatively
right on.
new show,
It sounds like an old show.
Yeah, it does. And it definitely feels like an old show, because it's like Relic of the Week.
Oh, right.
There were there were story arcs that they very loosely followed through the seasons, but you could really just kind of pick it up, whatever. And then they had a character named Steve that they brought in later. Steve had the magical ability of always knowing when someone was lying. He had a little teeny precog, a little teeny little mental ability there.
He could see people's tells.
Yes, human lie detector, right? But it was like a spider sense kind of thing. Now the show, like I said, schlocky, corny, production quality sometimes mixed, but it was the joy of watching these particular actors together and the writing that it's just fun. Right. It's fun stuff. So that's what I got for TV. What do you have for TV?
Well, I got a few. Not to get too deep, in the first couple, just a couple teams that, we were talking about as greatest teams of all time, television-wise. I'm thinking of Scooby-Doo,
Oh, yeah, man. Well, you're pre-Scrappy, though, right?
Right, pre-Scrappy, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
But there's the Mystery Machine.
Yes.
So they got a vehicle. Okay. Also, too, growing up, I was a big Power Rangers fan.
Oh, well, sure.
I felt like I was maybe a little too old to be watching Power Rangers, even though I was only 12, 13 years old.
But on the cusp, right?
Dude, I was on it, though, man. I was all about that. And then just randomly, my grandmother, she used to, we'd go over to my grandmother's house after school when I was in elementary school. Little House on the Prairie was always on. That was a solid team.
So Little House on the Prairie, that was a big show for its time.
It was.
It was a thing, man. Now, what was the adopted kid? Was it Charlie?
There were 3 adopted
kids. What
was
the dark-haired kid?
Oh, my gosh. I can't.
I want to say Charlie. Can I just say Charlie?
Charlie, I guess.
There was an episode when he got addicted to morphine.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
No, but I've read about it.
He was working at the pharmacy, and I remember seeing that as a kid and just being horrified.
Man.
Yeah, they put him in the corner of the cabin, and he, sweated it out for 3 days. It's like Train Spotting, Little Prairie style.
Okay, so hand-to-hand combat, everybody gets, a stick, and that's it. Who would win, the Ingalls or the Waltons?
I think the Ingalls, man.
I think so, too. Michael Landon was a badass.
Well, first of all, they're pioneers, right? They're...
Horse and carriage, they've got a vehicle.
Okay, right?
So,
horse and carriage. But they're living off the land.
Right, yeah.
They are more rugged.
Yeah.
The Waltons, they're living pretty fat, man. They got the nice house, and they're a little soft. And I give it to the Ingalls. Stick fight, I give it to the Ingalls.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah, I think I agree with you. They were. Waltons seemed like they were more East Coast. And Little House on the Prairie was West Coast.
That's the best question anyone's asked me in so long.
Okay, but the two teams that just came to mind right away. These aren't two TV shows where I've been I've seen every single episode and know everything about the show. But for me, the team on Knight Rider, the Foundation for Law and Government, FLAG, with Michael Knight. David Hasselhoff. Then you had Devin Miles, who was like, hello, Michael, I'm going to give you your mission.
I'm super sophisticated.
Right, I'm British, so, it all makes sense here. And then you have Dr. Barstow, which, I always wanted, Michael Knight and Dr. Barstow to become a thing.
Well, sure.
They never really did.
No.
And then, of course, the Knight Industries 2000 kit.
Oh, my God.
Which was every little boy's dream.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So, I thought the Knight Rider was pretty dope. You got a team, you got a car. 80s theme, 70s. I'm telling you, you got to have with every good team on television, there's always a vehicle. Speaking of, then there's Hardcastle and McCormick. Okay, so do you remember there was a period of time when all of these TV properties were getting movies? Your Dukes of Hazzard, your Starsky and Hutch.
Sure.
I feel that Hardcastle and McCormick they missed the boat on this. I think that Hardcastle and McCormick would make a great dark comedy action film. To where just the basis of it alone is just kind of so stupid and ridiculous.
For those who might not know the show, what is the premise?
All right, so Hardcastle and McCormick, it was about Milton Hardcastle, retired judge, Mark McCormick, ex-race car driver turned thief. The judge had 200 cases where the criminals walked on technicalities, and for some reason, these guys are giving them a dose of street justice, or double jeopardy. One of the two.
Yeah.
But but the main thing is there's this car called the Coyote X, and it's based off of a McLaren race car from the 70s.
Okay.
And if you watch the show, every single time they showed the Coyote X doing any kind of extreme move, it looked like the thing was going to fall apart.
Yeah.
It just looked like a piece of plastic on wheels.
Like a slot car,
Right, exactly. But when I was a kid, man, I thought that Hardcastle McCormick for some reason was just like the coolest thing, because it was on syndication. I loved the theme song to the show. And I thought that it was just a very interesting team to where, and Mark McCormick before Judge Hardcastle, or Hardcastle as they call him, before he retired, his very last case was like putting Mark McCormick behind bars. And for some reason he was like, he saw something in him and he's like, I'm going to let you go.
Yeah.
But you're going to more or less be my prisoner.
Yeah. So it's kind of sick.
Yeah.
There's kind of a sickness to it.
Yeah. That's why you could get that whole dark comedy element in there if you wanted to push it to the big.
Well, maybe there's got to be a script sitting somewhere.
Well, there
right?
might be a treatment on my computer, but
but for the sake of time, let's shift gears and do teams sports.
Okay, yeah, sports
right?
teams. We can close on that because it's not something we really touch on very much. I think this might be our first podcast where we even referred to sports.
For the most part.
Tom and I are sports fans. I think a lot of generalities get put around, geekdom and everything. When you're reading comics and you're watching movies and you're doing all that kind of stuff, you don't really know, what the football is.
Right.
But
football's hard too because with 40+ guys on a roster, how can it's got to be your life.
It takes, look, man, your 4 major sports, it takes years to figure out. From the rules to the players to all that kind of stuff.
And staying current.
Right.
My God.
It's not something that you can just, 1 week you figured it all out.
Right.
And for Tom and I both kind of grew up in city-centric sports teams. You kind of stuck to your city.
Right.
I stuck to my father's city.
Okay.
I grew up in Virginia, but my dad's from the suburbs of Philadelphia.
So Philadelphia teams are your teams.
Yes. So people you're listening to right now, me, the Philadelphia sports fan, and Tom, your Detroit sports fan.
Yeah, definitely.
So 2 solid sports towns, by the way. And great
old sports towns.
Old sports towns.
No expansion teams in these cities.
Nope, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nothing just fell into the city. They all have had original teams somewhat. Your Red Wings are original 6. The Flyers are part of the
72 or whatever.
Yeah.
The expansion.
But anyway, do you want to start?
All right, so I'm gonna end my awesome teams conversation with of all the Red Wings Stanley Cup winning teams, the one that is the most stacked roster pre salary cap era was the 2001-2002 Stanley Cup champions.
Woof. I already see a couple names. I'm
right.
Like,
so I'm not going to read off the whole roster, but you got 9 Hall of Famers on one team.
Great names.
Okay. Right. So Steve Yzerman. Right.
Stevie Y.
Brendan Shanahan. Luke Robitaille. Nicholas Lidstrom. Igor Larionov, the king of the Red Army. Brett Hull, who's in goal. Dominic Hasek. Right. Sergei Fedorov. Pavel Datsyuk, Chris Chelios. All Hall of Famers right there.
Get Chelios the cup, man.
Yeah,
Give him a cup, man.
So he was age 40 in that year.
Crazy.
Right? So he got it. So
hey, there weren't a lot of young bucks on that squad, man. From looking at these ages, there were several guys in the twilight of their career.
Without a doubt, because in hockey, man, once you're in your late 30s, that's usually, when the exit sign turns on for you. So
Kirk Maltby,
man, the mouth, man. Nobody get under your skin like that. Yeah, that's the grind line right there.
Darren McCarty,
Ugh. Kirk Maltby, and Chris Draper, one of the best shutdown lines ever, man. And that guy's like face-off stat was like, I don't know, like 70% or something stupid. Like Draper almost never missed a face-off.
Wow.
So 2002, they just rolled through everything. They destroyed the Carolina Hurricanes, in the final. I think it was like a 4-1. It wasn't a sweep or whatever, but the level of play, I would put this team up against any of the great rosters, whether it's a Gretzky-era Edmonton Oilers or anything else, is just one of the top team rosters that you would ever find.
I think in all the Detroit Red Wings teams that were successful in the late 90s, early 2000s, this team was definitely the one that was...
So stacked.
Yeah.
When Brett Hull's on your second line, there's trouble for sure.
Right, exactly, man. Steve Duchesne.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my
it's
gosh.
crazy. So what do you got?
Well, for me, in general, you got a winner right there, man. You got a winner. The Stanley Cup champion Detroit Red Wings that won it in the 01-02 season and wanted to get... What was the one before that? 97, 98?
You got 97, then 98, then 2002, and then 2008.
Okay.
That's the last four.
Must be nice. Unfortunately, as a Philadelphia sports fan, I haven't really had the opportunity to celebrate many championships in the city of Philly.
Here it comes.
2008 is my only world championship celebration, and I was working that night when the Phillies won the World Series, so I didn't get to celebrate with my father because I was off the night before, or 2 nights before that, and the game got rained out.
Oh, man.
Called out of work and everything.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so that was kind of a bummer, but that was, 2008 Philadelphia Phillies, technically, I guess I could say, is my, the greatest sports team I've ever experienced out of all of my favorite teams. But my favorite sports team as far as the history of Philadelphia sports goes is probably going to be the 1989, 90, 91 Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay.
Didn't have an offense to save anything. Randall Cunningham was pretty much just taking the ball and running around the field doing everything. But the Eagles' defense in the late 80s, early 90s, like you say, you'd stack that 2002 championship Detroit Red Wings team against anyone. I really don't think that, the high-powered, Green Bay Packers offense would have a fun day with the gangrene defense.
Yeah, there's the gangrene defense.
Gangrene,
yeah, man.
bro. I mean, golly, Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Jerome Brown, Mike Golick, Seth Joyner, Wes Hopkins, Eric Allen. I mean, the list goes on. And for that era, you say those names, you knew who the hell they were. They were. But unfortunately, that gangrene defense gets piled in with the no-name defense. Your fearsome foursome, the defenses that almost got there but never won a championship. And
football is so hard because there's such little time to do what you need to do to win.
I know. You've got 17 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's just a little bit of it because honestly, once you get through the 17 weeks, that's where the real game begins.
Right.
But yeah, Philadelphia Eagles don't have a Super Bowl championship, waiting patiently for one still to this day. I'm waiting. So whenever you guys want to get on that would be spectacular. But yeah, I think as far as sports teams, I can't look in my brain right now past those late 80s, early 90s Philadelphia Eagles teams. I mean, the first football game I ever saw live was in '89. I got to see the Philadelphia Eagles on my birthday play the team that went on to win the Super Bowl that year, the 49ers. So I got to see Joe Montana, Roger Craig, Jerry Rice, John Taylor, Brent Jones, Tom Rathman, all those guys. I got to see them.
But it's funny that you say that, too, because, we joked about the Lions at the very beginning of the show. My father had 2 teams when it came to football. One was the Lions, and we would go to Thanksgiving game every year and do all that stuff.
Eagles and Lions on Thanksgiving this year, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, well, maybe there will be a show.
Maybe
there will be a show.
Maybe there might be a show.
We'll see what happens.
Interesting.
Or perhaps we could take some notes and do a post-game recap.
Or a bet.
But
or something.
My father was a huge fan of the Joe Montana era 49ers.
You can't not like those teams.
Oh, my God.
The 88 Super Bowl when They came back. I'll never forget my dad when they came out of the second half and the Bengals ran back that kick.
Right.
My dad couldn't believe it. He was like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, right.
And then, an hour later, Dad's saying the same thing when Montana hit John Taylor in the back of the end zone.
Right.
He's like, I can't believe this is happening, because to that point, a lot of people consider that to be the greatest Super Bowl ever played, I think.
It's hard to not watch footage of Joe Montana and wonder, there are people who could much better argue quarterbacks and stats and efficiency and things like that, but there was something about
it's cool, man.
His command of the game is super rare.
Yep.
Super rare.
Very calm.
Right.
Wouldn't get in anybody's face.
Yeah.
I think that he and Tom Brady, you can't compare those two quarterbacks because they're two completely different quarterbacks.
Right.
I respect the hell out of both of them. But anyway, yeah. So
Well, hey man. So Joe Montana is the Captain America.
Joe Montana
of football, right?
Yeah.
Always knows what the next move to make. So
he's got the rings to prove it too.
So what a great team to sort of wrap up the team discussion.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah, for sure. And this actually, with that, kind of, I guess, wraps up this episode. This 90-minute plus podcast, running a little long, but
Giant size.
Giant size. Well, giant size. I would say giant size would be more of the 2-hour range, which is what I'm thinking. The next episode might be.
Right.
We might be getting into that 2-hour range, but we'll have to see. Big plans coming up for episode 8, folks.
Big plans.
I don't want to jinx anything yet, but we do have an important event coming up in the next few weeks entitled SummerSlam. That's professional wrestling, and for a period of time, it was kind of my thing. But we will be touching more on that here in the coming days. Be sure to check out our Twitter page, Matty's Podcast, at Matty's Podcast. I think I've been telling everybody at Matty Loves Podcast.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist.
It's Matty's Podcast?
It's Matty's Podcast because you cannot have a name that long. So,
okay.
Yeah, so Matty's Podcast. Also, too, we're working on revamping everything. Soon we're going to have a website.
And we are looking at what podcast community to stick our toe into.
For sure.
iTunes and Stitcher and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So, here I think in the coming weeks we're going to be working on that. There will be a reset week here soon, and I think maybe during that week we will be hammering out more of the official Matty Loves Podcast.
We are building momentum.
That's right,
people, and we have a lot of really great shows planned for the fall. So,
for sure. Oh man, we got Halloween coming up.
Halloween, John Carpenter.
Oh my gosh. So
Star Wars. Christmas.
There's so much coming up. So,
buyer's guide, maybe. Maybe we'll do a little buyer's guide for the holidays.
Maybe.
Right.
That wouldn't be too bad. That's a great idea, actually. So there's just so much. So you guys stick around. We thank you so much for tuning in, and just sit tight because we've got so much more on the way. For Dr. Tom Lucas, I'm Matt D. Simone. Thank you for joining us on the latest episode of Matty Loves Podcast. Be good to yourself, and we will see you next time.
Matty Loves Podcast. Matty Loves Podcast.